Hello and welcome to Overtime. My name is Nick Soutter. Joe will be joining us shortly. I do want to just do a sound check. As you guys know, we've been having some sound issues, so I'll just quickly double check and make sure that the sound is getting through. So I have a meter right here that tells me how the sound is, and that meter's always been extremely accurate. Right now, that meter is telling me what it did yesterday and the day before, which is that sound is not getting through, despite the fact that it appears to be. So I think there's the meter seems to have failed. If there's chop, I apologize. See if I can get that under control. I'm not sure what could be causing that, but I will look into it. So I'm going to assume that everything is one heck of an assumption, I know, but I'm going to assume that everything's it's choppy. All right. Is it just the audio that's choppy? Okay. Oh, and in fact, here comes Joe. Joe is literally coming in right now, so let me grab him and get him up. Joe, how are you? Oh, oh, dear Lord. Oh, dear Lord. All right, now I'm not convinced that they can hear you on the outside, so let me just double check also that that audio is we've been switching over from the Skype, and it's you make one little change here and everything goes out the window. But that looks god awful. You maybe want to bandage that or uh, oh, that stuff is I've never used it, but I've heard. So hmm. All right, so I've now okay, yeah, they're not hearing you, so I'm going to have to correct that. But meanwhile, at a minimum, I should be able to get you up on the camera. So there you are. Thank you very much for joining us. You are on vacation, good sir. So I sincerely appreciate you taking the. Yep, I don't. That's 2 or 3 times now. I've actually saved changes that fix this problem, and I come back and the changes are gone. That is really bizarre. Not pleased about that, but let me this may do it. Could I quickly get a sound check from you? That did not. No, did you turn off your sound, or because now I can't hear you?
Oh, I muted myself back.
All right, there you go.
Check 1, 2.
All right, that looks like that's reporting that the sound is coming through. So I think we're going to be okay now. So let me just make a.
Did they see what I showed them on the screen?
They did not. If you really want to show them again.
Yeah.
So you took a bad spill. Ow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So what I landed on my abdomen somehow and took that, and so I'm pretty banged up. I'm actually in Hagerstown. I'm gonna be hanging out with Steve Shives tomorrow.
nice, nice. I've met him once. He came on the show, but it was a spectacular conversation. So he won't
Cool.
remember me. Tell him I said hi anyway.
Well,
um,
he's a friend of Chris. He's a friend of Chris too.
yeah. I know. Well, that's how he came on. So, and I'd like to say too that a member of our live chat has been promoted. I would like to congratulate KCA Randy on his new position as our PR rep, and from now on he is going to be. I like the way he thinks there. So, all right, and then I did want to just you know what? Well, I am going to need to get to that, but I don't have to get to it now. All right, so let's talk about what's going on. I think there's obviously a lot going on with COVID, and I wanted to get into some of that, but quite frankly, we've all heard it. And if COVID changes dramatically, which it may, we may get new mandates coming soon. It looks like he is actually preparing a pathway. Biden is preparing a pathway for a an actual, either a full mandate, which it turns out there is legal precedent for, or the passports. I think there's a lot to discuss there, but I think more urgently and more um, uh, timely. What's the word I'm looking for? When it's
Uh,
like,
Pressing.
yeah, more pressing. Thank you. Is several economic issues that we have facing us, and they get conflated very easily. And it seems like it's confusing. It's actually not as confusing as it appears, and so I think we should try to go through it. Economics seems confusing. It can be, especially when you get into the nuts and bolts of some of the more complicated stuff. But one of my favorite, I say this all the time. You want to become a billionaire in this country. It's not actually that hard to do. There's 4 words in any capitalist country as to how to become rich. Four words. 4 words. Buy low, sell high. The problem is almost nobody can do it because our instincts are wired actually the opposite way. So when the stock market crashes, your instincts are to sell. So everybody sells so that you mitigate your losses. It's fear-based. People who can avoid that and say, oh, the stock market's going down, I'm going to start buying. Those are the people who get rich, but it's really scary. It's against our instincts. So there's 4 words. So it's actually simple, but it's not easy. And I think that's sort of how the economy, a lot of the bigger concepts of things that we'll be dealing with work. But it can get complicated, so we'll try to muddle through it. So we have 2 things coming up, and they're 2 different things. First, the U.S. government tomorrow is going to shut down at midnight if they do not pass some form of spending bill. Now, this bill is to authorize spending in order to keep the government running, in order to send out Social Security checks, all this other stuff. It has nothing to do with whether or not we have enough money. These bills always have more than we actually have the money for, but it has to do with actually authorizing that we're going to make these payments and that this is what our priorities are in the budget. Now, there's no way we're going to pass a budget in that time, so what they need to do is a continuing resolution of some kind that says, well, we'll kick the can down the road till December. Right now, it looks like they're going to have a hard time doing that. If they fail, the government shuts down midnight tomorrow. That's the first problem. The second problem is the debt ceiling. This is a separate thing. They seem related. They kind of are, but they're also not. The debt ceiling is basically authorizing us to actually pay the bills that we created in the budget. So it's 2 different things. The budget doesn't actually necessarily care of whether or not we can pay for it, just cares about this is what we're going to buy. The debt ceiling is about doesn't care what we bought. It doesn't matter what we bought. These are the debts that we have to pay off. It looks like you're going to say something. You want to clarify?
Well, no, that's correct. I mean, basically, the debt ceiling rate, when we're at our debt limit, we have to raise the debt ceiling in order to borrow the money for the things we've already allocated and in many cases already spent.
Exactly.
So we basically bought things on credit, and now we have to borrow the money to pay for those things. So we're basically transferring the debt from whoever we borrowed it from in the first place, wherever we spent it at without actually having it. We actually have to go get the money now to pay for those bills.
Exactly. So, and it's easy to see why we conflate the 2, and they are not unrelated. But the problem is, we have to. I agree completely with the Republicans. The budget's too big. We have to fix it. We can't keep increasing the debt. But we also have to pay the bills that we've already signed off for. And what they're doing is they're putting a gun to everybody's head and saying, we're not going to pay for the bills that we've already signed off for until we fix the budget. Well, I understand the budget needs to be fixed, but every time there's an opportunity to fix the budget, they don't help any more than the Democrats in fixing the budget. In fact, they try to increase military spending and all the things that they want. So it's yeah, please.
Well, that's the thing. They're not even, by not allowing the debt ceiling to be raised, they're not even paying for the things that they themselves want to spend the money on,
or have already spent. Because in here, please.
Yeah, and actually, it goes one step further, because I mean, because there's one of 2 things. Either the people that are voting against it don't actually understand the difference, which is a problem, because at least their rhetoric indicates that, although that may just be politics. And I actually have to disagree with something you said. It's not that the budget's too big. It's that we're not collecting enough revenue to pay for the things that we actually need. So, in other words, the taxes on certain facets of the economy are too small.
I'm so pissed because I was about to nail you. It's not that the budget's too big. It's that it doesn't pay for the things we need. I was like, that's the same. I was like, no, it's not the same. You're right. Shoot, you're right. You're right. It isn't the same. That's you got the way out. It isn't the same, and that is an important distinction. There is ways to increase revenue. I do think we need to decrease the budget, especially military spending. We spend more than every other
Well,
country in the world combined. Combined.
yeah, I agree. I agree with you there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not every country. It's like the top 14 or 15.
Well,
As in-
last I checked, it was the top. It's arguable depending on whether you include discretionary funding or not, but it's at least the top 26. And I checked this about 2 years ago, and it was more than all of them. At that point, it was more than all of them. So by a hair, but it was more than all of them. And
yeah.
since most of them are allies, it's like, we need to get a hold of ourselves. So at any rate,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, please.
I mean, if that's the thing, if we just reduced ourselves to double what Russia and China are spending, which would still be a ridiculous amount, we could cut it by about a third.
Yep, and we'd still have our allies in NATO, assuming we didn't tell NATO to fuck off, which only an idiot would do that.
Right.
So yeah, well, and so what's happened here is the president is in term for 4 years. That's 4 budgets. For 3 of those budgets, the Republicans passed the debt deficit increase because they knew that they had to do it, and even they agree. Even what's his name, Turtle guy. Oh dear Lord.
McConnell.
McConnell, thank you. Even McConnell has said this is a must-pass piece of legislation, so he knows it has to pass, which is odd that he's holding everybody over the barrel with it. But they passed it 3 years in a row. The fourth, they didn't. So what we are actually doing right now is paying for that 4th year. They deliberately passed this on to the Democrats to hold that around their neck. We'll discuss how and why that works later. But what we were talking about isn't Biden's budget. Biden hasn't passed a budget yet. We're talking about paying for Trump's last year, and they're saying it's the Democrats' fault it's so high.
Right, and this is what they've done this before. I mean, basically, and unfortunately, because the public doesn't generally understand the difference between the two things we're talking about, they fall for it. Although to a degree, because generally speaking, once the government actually shuts down, people tend to correctly blame the Republicans. Basically, once all the checks stop flowing, then people are saying, well, who's actually holding it up?
Well, I don't know. I've heard that they blame the party in power. I don't. We'll see. I don't know. But that's what we're looking at on the. So at midnight we're looking at the government shutdown. But again, the shutdown and the default are two different things. Now, the default we're looking at on October 19th, roughly. That's when the Treasury Secretary runs out of desperate measures to try to pay all our bills. All that means at that point is that she's gonna be in the same position that many Americans who aren't making enough money are in every month, which is they take a look at how much money they have, they take a look at their total bills and realize the numbers don't quite square, and they're gonna have to figure out which bills they're gonna pay and which ones they're not. The big problem with that is the U.S. We don't always pay our bills for any number of reasons, but we've always been capable of paying our bills, and we've always been considered a rock-solid investment, and we certainly pay bonds, dividends on or yields on U.S. Treasury bonds, and so on and so forth. If we suddenly cannot pay those, people are going to say, well, we don't want them. Now, the last time we really seriously threatened to do this was in 2011. This resulted in the U.S. credit being downgraded from AAA to AA. And in the same way that if your credit score goes down, you end up having to pay more, right? Your credit cards go up. You have to pay more credit cards if you have lower credit card rating. In that same way, the U.S. had to pay more for its debt. The last time this happened, just by going from a AAA to a AA credit rating, the U.S. lost value of $2.4 trillion in U.S. stocks. That is the value that just got wiped out by nature of the fact that we now had to pay more in terms of those of the credit rating and to borrow money, and because our rating had been lowered. Now, people have predicted dire consequences, and honestly, they weren't as dire as people had thought, so that's good. But realistically speaking, anybody who understands this, and people who understand this 10 times better than I do, are saying that this is a huge problem. The president of J.P. Morgan has come out and said every time this comes up, it gets fixed, but we should never even get this close. He told Reuters News that I think this whole thing is mistaken, and one day we should just have a bipartisan bill and get rid of the debt ceiling entirely. This is nothing but politics. Goldman Sachs came out and said that this standoff is, quote, the riskiest debt limit deadline in a decade. And again, McConnell has said that this can't be allowed to happen. So has Schumer. And yet here we are. And then the last thing I'll do before we really just toss into this, and I'll go check out the live chat because it's been going for a little while. Now, I think I'm just blocked on McConnell's name. I think it's just like one of those things that's so traumatic at this point that every time I think about McConnell, I see the turtle, and I'm just like, I don't know his name, and I don't think I want to know. I mean, McConnell's fucking evil. So at this point, he's so cynical. He will do anything for a vote, and he doesn't care what he does to the country. And most Republicans I know are starting to really hate his ass. So the McConnell has said, not McConnell, I did it again. Jesus, I'm not kidding. I wish this were a joke. Yeah, it is McConnell. So, okay. Mitch McConnell has said that the Democrats have enough votes to pass this. Now, what does that mean? Normally you'd think, well, hey, they could vote and pass it. Well, they have enough votes to pass it if there isn't a Republican filibuster. If there is, it doesn't pass. They keep filibustering it and blocking it. Now, what he's really talking about is a process called reconciliation. Reconciliation is a process by which they can pass it with only 50 votes. Now, reconciliation is not easy. It requires a lot of passing bills back and forth between like dozens of smaller bills back and forth during the process. It takes about 3 weeks to do, which means they have to start it now if they're going to get it done. Schumer has said they will not do it through reconciliation. By doing it through reconciliation, you cause several problems for the Democrats. First, they lose at least 3 weeks because they have to hustle and get this thing done. So their agenda is stifled for 3 weeks. Second, they actually have to put a number on specifically how much they want to raise the debt ceiling. Often when the debt ceiling is quote, raised, what they're actually doing is suspending it and just saying we will re-enable it in however many days, and that's when the next debt ceiling crisis happens. So this commits them to a number which the Republicans can then say, oh, hey, this is how much money they want to spend, which of course isn't true. That's the number that they have to do to cover for the Republican spending over the last 4 years, but that's what happens. So they have said they will not use reconciliation. If they don't start the process within probably the next 48 hours, the chances of them being able to get it done in time are slim. So it's, again, a game of brinksmanship. They pass the deadline by which they could reasonably get it done in reconciliation. And then the question is, what happens next? The Republicans, all they have to do is just not filibuster. And McConnell has said that's not going to happen. The Democrats, have to do this themselves, and what he really means is he's forcing them to do reconciliation. So that's where we stand.
Well, the other problem for the Democrats is that they're trying to do that other spending bill, the $3.5 trillion by reconciliation. But you can only use reconciliation like once or twice a year, depending on how you do it. So they've used it once. They have one more shot this year. So unless they tied them all together, then that would mean the $3.5 trillion bill is kaput. And they don't like they want to do that either. So, so the thing is that I think what's going to end up happening is what happens has happened multiple times. Like you mentioned, 2011. That was Ted Cruz was the one that was filibustering. Let it shut down. It's going to hurt a bunch of people. And then the Democrats need to be on point and on message, make it clear that it's them holding it up, that we're ready to go, that they're not allowing us to have the vote. And then stuff it back at them as has happened twice before, at least. Because I'm getting sick of this. But then the other thing too, the Democrats need to put pressure on Manchin and Sinema, because I'm not going to say to throw out the filibuster, but because I think it is valuable, but I think we really need to go back to the old school filibuster, where if you want to filibuster, you can't just say filibuster and then walk out of the chamber. That you're going to have to stand there, like Ted Cruz actually did in 2011, to stand there reading Green Eggs and Ham and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And hey, look, to his credit, at least he did that. But you should have to do that. That's the way, because that's actually the way this filibuster was going way back. So should be able to make the case to Manchin and the cinema that that's not destroying the filibuster. That's actually returning to the traditional filibuster that we had for 25 years before it got changed.
Why did they change it, and why would that help?
Well, because a couple things. They changed it because people didn't want to actually have to stand there for hours and hours. They didn't want to have Foley catheters or wear Depends or something, because you can't stop talking except for questions. And at one point, they think they passed a rule that you couldn't ping pong your thing. So in other words, it's just you and I want to filibuster, but you're going to help me. I can't hand the floor over to you, then go pee or get some sleep, and then come back and you pass it back to me. You can't do that.
Or I can't ask a question that's So I have a. Would you yield for a question? Yes. Okay. I have a question that comes in 29 parts. Each have 16 subparts, and then I can just keep.
No, you could actually do that, but that's how it has to go. And the thing is that, and that's how it always was. Now, why is that? Why should it be changed? I mean, because basically right now it's too easy, because you don't actually have to stand there and talk. That basically you can. It's too easy to filibuster, and so because the other thing too is when you're actually standing there and filibustering, it's video that can be used against you in political ads. And that's another reason why I don't. They don't like it.
So if you're sitting up there saying, "I will not eat them, Sam, I am," then they're going to say, "This is what he does on the floor of the." I never even. That's a good one.
Exactly,
okay.
and that's basically what happened to Ted Cruz previous time. Now, in fact, at one point years ago, when you talked, you actually had to talk about things relevant to the bill, and that got changed too. So you could literally talk about anything, and you could read the dictionary, you could read a phone book or whatever.
Yeah.
But again, if you want to go up there and show that that's what you're doing, you better hope that the people are behind what you're doing, or else they're going to start turning against you. And that's what happened. That's why Cruz gave up. He did that for like 3 sessions in a row, and eventually people were like, "Hey, asshole, I can't get my paycheck and can't put food on my table. So quit your bullshit." And then he quit, and then that was the end of that filibuster.
Okay, so I do think I cut you off just because I wanted you to clarify that for the audience. You were talking about, we had just talked about how this had happened prior, and then the question is, what's going to happen this time, and what's going to work this time, and where do you think it's headed?
It's hard to say. It's really going to depend on if the Democrats if anything should move Manchin and or Sinema to reform the filibuster. This should be it. Can
they do it? Don't they have to do that at the beginning of the session though? When the rules are set at the beginning of each new Congress. No. Okay.
No, they can change it whenever, but. The thing is that yes, they could do that at any time. It's typical, it's traditional that they do it at the beginning of the session, but it's not necessary.
Okay. So reform the filibuster and.
Yeah. Well, now if they do reform the filibuster, then I think it'll last 3 or 4 days of being filibustered, and then whatever Republicans doing, it's going to give up. If they don't reform the filibuster, then I'm predicting a 2 to 3 week shutdown like we've had before.
And during that shutdown,
and a lot of.
Well, during that shutdown, it seems to me that the Democrats at this point actually have an incentive to allow the shutdown, and here's why. If the shutdown happens, they can no longer do the reconciliation. And the reason is because while they technically can continue to work without a paycheck, they can't have their staffers work without a paycheck. So they lose 90% of their staffers, 90% of everything's just volunteers by this point, and it's not people who are qualified to be able to. It's a 3-week process under ideal circumstances. With the government shut down, they will not have time for what is it? They won't have time to do reconciliation. So it seems to me, actually, despite the fact they're saying we don't want to shut down, maybe in their best interest. Any thought on that?
Yeah. Well, like as I said, as it's turned out, I mean, the Republicans keep thinking. See, here's what the Republicans trade on. The Democrats have more compassion for people than the Republicans do. Whatever faults the Democrats have, whatever criticisms people have for them, they, to whatever degree that they have empathy, it's more than what the Republicans have. So they have a tendency to cave on these things because they don't like the idea that there's people out there not getting their checks. Republicans don't care. The thing is when the Democrats stand their ground, the Republicans tend to get the lion's share of the blame. Not that the Democrats walk away blameless, but to my recollection, all those shutdowns we've had over the last 20 some odd years, generally the Republicans have taken the brunt of the displeasure. So if I'm the Democrats, stand strong, try to move your recalcitrant members, and let it happen, and then beat the hell out of the Republicans in the court of public opinion.
All right, Michael Westby has said that we should change it from filibuster to trial by combat. I will admit, I think the ratings on C-SPAN would go up dramatically. I'd watch.
Yeah.
I would take.
If they do that,
please.
If they do that, they have to play the Star Trek fight music from Amok Time.
Amok Time, absolutely. They have to do that. I would tell you, I love my kids. I love them dearly. I would take their college fund money and spend all of it. I would pay Mitch McConnell and Jesus. I'm just names for me today.
Schumer.
Yep. With the lip-thar, whatever they call it, out there. 2 men enter, 1 man leave. I would sacrifice my child. I'd argue I'm actually giving them a future that way, because if McConnell...
Are you talking about batless?
No, the lip thar. It's a big, heavy, long stick. It's got a kind of a sickle on one end and a big weight on the other, and it's what the Vulcans use. And you can whack them with the weight, or you can use the. Yeah. I really don't. I'm not proud of the fact that I know that answer. So, all right. So, let's see. So, at this point, what do you think are the chances of a shutdown tomorrow night?
100%.
Oh, okay.
100%.
100%. Okay. And this is we're going to clip this. So if he's wrong, we'll just like anytime he and I disagree in the future, we're just going to 100%. I'm going to do this. I need a soundboard. I need Oz.
Well, and I'll tell you this, I will be very happy to be wrong, but I think it's guaranteed that it's going to happen.
Well, and it is because too they are trying to. So the question is, are they going to pass a clean bill, or are they going to try to get through the extra funding? Biden wants funding, and I think we have to be honest. And the environment, we need to start spending more money on that. We need to start spending less money in other areas. We need to start spending more money on the environment. It's getting bad already, and it's going to get a lot worse very soon. We've seen more storms, worse storms, more damage. Water levels are going up, and we need to try to ameliorate some of this. And there's a huge chunk for that. There's infrastructure spending, 3.4% billion or something like that. I forget what it was, and they're trying to block that. So the question is, do you pass with it or without? So it's a nightmare. So then the next
3.4. It's 3.5 trillion.
Oh, 3. And I said billion. Thank you. All right. This is why you're here. I look just slightly less an idiot when you're around. Just slightly though. I'm sorry. What?
It's a line. Did you ever see the movie? Well, it was originally called The Nude Bomb, but it was later changed to The Return of Maxwell Smart.
I did not see it. No.
Oh, okay. Well, there's this funny scene here, close toward the end of the movie, where the villain is monologuing and talking to Maxwell Smart, and he says, "Agent Smart, you are not a complete idiot. Almost, very close, but not complete."
And as Andring has pointed out here, I agree the odds of a shutdown are very high. So I would have put them at probably 60%, but it seems that both of you have them higher. You both are, well, at least one of you is an intelligent person. At
least one.
At least one, yeah. So, yeah, okay. So So it looks like we're looking at midnight tomorrow night. Now, what would a shutdown look like short term?
Well, it's like they like every other one's looked like. Basically, you know, most government functions shut down. There's a few things that absolutely cannot shut down regardless, like Capitol Police. The military can't shut down; they just don't get paid. Um, and so it's going to be, as always, ugly for the poor people who are on the or the well, ironically, on the receiving end of not receiving their check. Um, you know, it doesn't really affect the people in Congress because you know they have money. Even the poorest of them has money. Um, but all the staffers and it's going to really hurt people because you remember you know any of the federal welfare programs, any of the you know those all come to a halt. So that means people who need medical care. I mean, they'll get care, but it's going to create problems. Anything that's elective is going to be put on hold, and you know, it's going to be really bad. And it also means that providers who accept Medicare and Medicaid, it means their payments are delayed, so it's going to hurt them. So
Oh,
it's going to have a ripple effect.
right now we have a stellar, rock solid medical system in this country. It's not like it's stressed or anything for any reason. So no, I'm sure that's not going to be a problem. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So, and then of course, national parks shut down, all that other stuff, which actually can be a problem for any number of people, but it still isn't perhaps it isn't any of the most serious stuff. We're going to lose, I guess, some of the funding to the emergency relief funding for the latest hurricanes to strike the U.S. So,
Mm.
and our embassies, I think, across on foreign countries also closed. So there's okay. A lot of stuff going on there. So now it'll be down, obviously, for a little while. That's one game of chicken. What? Two questions. And this first one is a shot in the dark, and I'm asking just so we have something to work with. But it's a shot in the dark, which is what do you think's going to happen when it comes to the oh dear Lord, when it comes to the deficit? And B, what do you think should happen, assuming they're not the same thing? What should the Dems do in this case, and what do you think they will do?
Well, like I said before, they should stand their ground and they should get the Republicans to pass the damn thing, a clean debt ceiling raise or suspension or whatever they want to call it. It needs to just happen. Because again, as you pointed out, when they're in, they always do it. They know, so that proves to me that they know that what they're saying is complete horseshit. Because otherwise, they would be fighting over this all the rest of the times, but they don't. So you know, now I think that because the Democratic margins are so slim in both cases, both the House and the Senate, I think they're actually going to stand their ground because there's a group of progressives in the House that's basically said like, you know, it has nothing to do with this particular bill, but the whole 3.5 trillion versus the infrastructure bill that was agreed to in the Senate. That if you know if you don't come along, we're not going to pass this, and I think they're going to do the same thing on the on this debt ceiling raise, and you know I'm with them on that. I'm not I'm kind of mixed on the other stuff, but with raising the debt ceiling, I'm definitely with them. What irritates me right now with Manchin and Cinema is that you know they keep saying that you know well we just can't approve these bills are too high, but they're not offering any you know compromise. I mean, at least with the transportation bill, you know, the infrastructure bill, um, Manchin actually did broker a compromise.
Mhm.
So I would argue that what he did was insufficient, but at least he got a bill. But it's like, well, dude, you can just stand there and say it's too much all you want, but if you don't tell us where we're supposed to nip and tuck, where the line is acceptable to you, then you either need to get on board or shut the fuck up because you know you're basically being obstructionist and you're obstructing the wrong damn team.
So, yeah, well, okay, hold on, I had to process there. Okay, so when was
So
last?
so so
Yes,
so
please,
so,
please.
so just to summarize, I think the Democrats are going to stand pat and make the Republicans cave.
All right. Well, if we have a um, if we have a shutdown starting tomorrow midnight, I think it becomes a lot easier for them to do that because there's no way anybody could expect them to do reconciliation while the government is shut down. They can still do
Right.
things, but it's a bare bones minimum, and reconciliation isn't one of them. So, yeah, and it seems like the general consensus here is that the almost certainly going to be a shutdown starting tomorrow. So, do you think McConnell is going to keep trying this? Now, if it doesn't work, if they actually stand up to him and they're able to stop him, but they say, well, it's because the government was shut down, so he can't do it. Does he try this again, or does he just say, okay, enough of this, and find some other way to try to, browbeat the Democrats?
You mean like next year? You mean
Yeah,
if
yeah,
they do raise
yeah.
it?
Next year. I mean, it's clear. I mean, he was the one who he was the one who was the amount of utter horseshit that McConnell has been behind. When you take a look at the fact that he was the one who orchestrated the first one in 2011, that was McConnell, and nobody had ever even thought of doing that at the time. And he had said the line, what was it? Some people were worried that this was a hostage we were going to shoot. Well, I think we've demonstrated at least that the economy is a hostage that's worth ransoming. It's like, holy shit. And then he was behind the was it Gorsuch?
Yeah.
No, yeah, behind that nomination, which was absolutely a steal in my view, and I don't think that's a very hard position to justify. So, does he try this again next year, or does he go find some other fucked up thing to do?
I think that those aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
I think he will do this again, and I would think he will find other fucked up things to do as well.
All right. Well, I think. Okay. Any other thoughts on anything that we've missed? Anything you wanted to cover, by the way, before? I mean, I wanted to make sure because this is all kind of urgent and happening right now. I figured it was worth
Um,
putting a show into this, but
no, I think that's probably it because I think we should. I don't want to get too off. There's tons of other things we could talk about, but I don't want to get too far off what the core of what we talked about here. Um, I think we've kind of laid it out. I guess the question is, so what's your prediction as far as like, because again, I think shutdown's going to happen, and I'm going to go even further and make a prediction. If it does happen, it's going to last for 13 working days. Working days being not counting Saturdays and Sundays.
yeah, yeah. So, what is my prediction? I think it's more likely than not. I'm not sure I'm as convinced, but the more I think about how much of a benefit this is to the Democrats, the more I realize since they can really scuttle the Republicans in trying to actually do it, they may do that. So the Republicans may say, "Hey, here's how we stop the shutdown." The Republicans say, "Oh, sorry." I said, "Dems, oh, sorry," and then have that happen. Once that happens, they have a lot more power in the debt ceiling fight. I'd like to say that they stick to their guns, there's no compromise, and ultimately they pass a clean bill, because at that point it strikes me as almost clear sailing to doing that. It's been my experience that one should never, ever underestimate the Democrats' willingness to cave, no matter how strong their hand.
Well,
Um,
and again, like I said, I think the problem is that, but somebody said that that empathy is worth 3 cents. I disagree, but sometimes that empathy can be, it's a good thing, but it can also be used against you. And so when ends up happening, so it has happened in some of the previous things back, like when G.W. Bush was president, um, that out of concern for the people that are getting hurt, that the Democrats have caved. And I think they have to learn that, you know, the rules, the old rules don't apply anymore. They're fighting against people who clearly do not give a shit about the well-being of anybody except their donors. So they need to step up. And I think, quite frankly, part of the reason why people on the left have not been as sanguine with the Democrats is that the Democrats have been this wishy-washy kind of thing, and I think they'll actually find that they'll get more support if they actually gird their loins and stand up for some, principles.
um, all right, and Titans. Oh, Is that you or okay? I heard a vibration. I wasn't sure. I thought maybe it was either someone trying to come in
No,
or what.
the motor,
Um,
motorcycle went by.
at noon CST, according to Titan, Nancy Pelosi was filmed walking out of chambers with a shit-eating grin on her face. Yeah, that's well, and they've been under a lot of stress because, as you pointed out, the far left or the progressives of the party have been getting very tired of these compromises, and they've said that they're going to stop working with the party if they continue to capitulate at every turn. And I think there is a significant. I think you're right about their instincts to try to help by caving, but I think my hope is that they start thinking a little long term and realizing that yeah, by doing that, they make it so they lose more and more each and every successive year, and so they're getting a short term game for a cumulative long term loss. And that's how we've ended up with again Gorsuch and all the other staggering losses that the Dems have. And the Dems are going to get their asses handed to them sometimes, no matter what. I mean, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But it's wow, when they're ahead 99. When they're on the 99 yard line, they still find a way to barely eke out a win. It's yeah.
They're good at that.
Yeah. All right. Well, so thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us. Friday we will be having After Dark, our regular call-in show. You know what? I definitely enjoy your vacation, but if it turns out that you've got a little time in an empty hotel room there, I want to give us a buzz. We'd love to see you. Anyone else?
What is it?
Friday, 10
happen?
p.m. Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern. It's just the After Dark call-in show.
I actually will probably be home by then. It'll be really a matter of how tired I am, if I have any energy left.
Yeah, take care of yourself. Definitely first, and then and hopefully by that point we'll be on the. We had 9 people last time, and that started to stress the system a lot. And the new system, hopefully, we should have an infinite number without any difficulties. But
I'm telling you, StreamYard.
yeah, but the StreamYard would definitely do it. I don't know what I got against StreamYard. I got a whole host of things against StreamYard. But mostly that Maddie uses it. I don't want to give him the satisfaction. All right. So thank you, Joe. Thank you to the mods, Titan, everyone else, all our supporters. If you'd like to support us, the links down at the bottom. Become a patron. Our patron hangs are the first Monday of every month. Hopefully you guys can join us. We can talk about the show, talk about politics, talk about whatever you guys like. In the meantime, let's see if the lights stay on. But thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like and subscribe, and we will see you on Friday.
All right, good deal.
I know.